He didn't look like a hero. Sitting hunched beside a rusted shopping cart under the overpass on Sunset Boulevard, Jack Reynolds looked more like a shadow than a man. His boots were split at the seams, the American flag patch on his worn jacket faded to a memory, and his silver hair hung down in uneven strands beneath a veteran's cap, so stained it seemed to weep the years it had witnessed. But beneath all that, beneath the silence, beneath the smell of dirt and disappointment, was a man who once led soldiers through fire. Jack had once been a name spoken with reverence in a dozen platoons: 1st Recon, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia. Some said he'd walked through hell and made it back with nothing but shrapnel in his ribs and a Medal of Honor he kept folded inside a sock. But life has a way of folding heroes into the margins. Therefore, Jack now sat in silence, half forgotten, watching people pass by, heads down, earbuds in, Starbucks in hand. None of them recognized the man who once pulled 3 wounded soldiers from a burning Humvee. None of them saw the war still raging behind his eyes. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, Jack had a house in Bakersfield, a wife who painted sunflowers on the porch wall, and a son who loved baseball and hated goodbyes. But war changes people. And when Jack came back from his 5th tour, it wasn't just his bones that were fractured, it was everything. He couldn't explain why he screamed in his sleep, or why he drank too much, or why his son stopped calling. One night, without telling anyone, Jack left. He thought he was sparing them. He thought he'd come back once he fixed himself. But no one ever taught Jack how to fix a ghost. Now, 2 decades later, he was just another forgotten soul wrapped in camouflage. That morning, the sky was smudged gray with city haze, and the air tasted like exhaust. Jack had just managed to stand, knees aching, when a voice startled him. "You okay, sir?" He turned. A young woman stood there. Her face was kind, brown curls under a blue beanie, a clipboard in one hand, a steaming coffee in the other. Her name was Laura Michaels, a volunteer with a local outreach group. She had seen Jack for weeks, sitting in that same spot. But something about today, maybe the way he clenched his fist when the wind blew, made her stop. "I'm with shelter vets," she said. "We help get veterans off the streets. You mind if I ask you a few questions?" Jack stared at her. "Name?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Jack." "Jack what?" "Reynolds." She wrote it down. Something shifted. Her eyes widened slightly. "You served?" Jack pointed to the patch on his sleeve. She crouched beside him and handed him the coffee. Then she took out her phone. "I'd like to record a short video," she said gently, "just to help raise awareness. You don't have to say much. Just tell us who you are." Jack wasn't sure why he agreed. Maybe it was the heat of the coffee in his palm. Maybe it was the way she looked at him like he still mattered. He stared into the lens, cleared his throat, and said quietly, "My name is Jack Reynolds. I served 27 years in the Marine Corps. I lost good men. I gave everything. And now, I'm just tired." The video lasted 39 seconds. It would change everything. Laura uploaded the clip that afternoon with the caption, "This is Jack. He fought for us. It's time we fight for him." At first, it got a few shares, a couple comments, 100 views. But then something unexpected happened. Therefore, within 12 hours, the video had gone viral. And that's when Sylvester Stallone saw it. He was in his home office in Beverly Hills late at night, watching old fight tapes from Rocky IV when the notification popped up on his feed. Something about Jack's voice, raspy, humble, trembling with dignity, stopped him cold. Stallone had played a soldier once. He'd been Rambo, but that was fiction. This man, Jack Reynolds, was the real thing. He re-watched the clip twice. Then he stood up, paced the room, and muttered, "No way in hell this guy's dying in the street." By morning, Stallone had launched a public campaign, sure justice for Jack. He posted a message to his 20 million followers. This man gave everything for his country. Now the country owes him. I'm starting a fundraiser, and I'll match every dollar donated. Let's bring Jack home. It exploded. News outlets picked it up. Celebrities joined in. Veterans across the country posted their own stories, tagging Jack's name. But the attention brought more than just donations. Therefore, it brought out someone from Jack's past, a man in uniform, watching from a police cruiser in Fresno. The name, Jack Reynolds, hit him like a punch to the gut. Because Officer Mike Reynolds, now 38, had spent most of his life wondering if his father was still alive. Now he knew. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to forgive him or finally ask why he left. Jack, meanwhile, didn't know any of this. He only knew that one morning Laura returned, eyes wide, with a smile that felt like sunrise. "You're famous, Jack," she whispered. "People are talking about you. Stallone is talking about you." Jack blinked. "Stallone?" "Yeah, the Stallone. He saw your video." Jack chuckled once. "Rambo?" "Yeah, and he wants to help." For the first time in years, Jack felt something warm rise in his chest. Not coffee, not pride, but hope. Real, burning, terrifying hope. And that's when he saw the envelope in Laura's hand. "From the VA," she said. Jack opened it and froze. His benefits had been canceled. 30 years of service, erased by a clerical error. The war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. And Jack Reynolds was about to face the hardest fight of his life. Jack couldn't sleep. Even with the new cot the shelter provided, even with a clean blanket and hot meals 3 times a day, his mind was loud. Louder than the freeway that ran just beyond the brick walls. Louder than the chatter in the dining hall or the news segments playing clips of him and Stallone back to back. The silence inside him had turned into noise, not of the city, but of the past. In 1992, Sergeant Jack Reynolds had led his team into a village just north of Kandahar, a failed intel drop. What was supposed to be recon turned into a bloodbath. One of the boys, a 19-year-old named Ryan Mitchell, had screamed his mother's name just before the explosion. Jack carried 3 men out that night with half his left side torn by shrapnel. But that wasn't what haunted him. Therefore, what haunted him was the 4th man he couldn't reach in time. His name was Jacob Stallone. He was Sylvester's younger brother, and Jack never forgot the face, the eyes, the guilt, that secret he buried so deep it fused into his bones. So when Stallone reached out to meet him in person, a private meeting arranged in the back of a modest shelter cafe, Jack didn't know how to feel. He stood awkwardly in his second-hand jacket, hands trembling slightly. Stallone walked in, bigger than the screen, but softer than expected. "I saw your video," he said simply. Jack nodded, unsure of what to say. "I don't pretend to know what you've been through," Stallone continued, "but I want to help. We've already raised over $1 million. And I'm not stopping there." Jack looked down. "I don't want pity." "You're not getting pity," Stallone said, voice steady. "You're getting justice." Jack swallowed hard. "I knew your brother," he said, almost a whisper. Stallone blinked. "What?" "Jacob. He served with us. We were ambushed in Kandahar." A long silence. "He didn't make it." Stallone's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Thank you for trying." The 2 men stood in quiet acknowledgement of a pain neither had fully healed. Meanwhile, across the state, Mike Reynolds watched everything from his small TV in the station break room. His hand trembled on the remote. His wife Amanda stepped in with a cup of tea and froze. "That's him?" she asked. Mike didn't answer. The image on screen showed Jack shaking Stallone's hand in a sheltered gymnasium while people clapped behind them. "They say he's a hero," Amanda added gently. Mike stood up, fists clenched. "He left," he said. "That's all I remember. He walked out one night and never came back." "But what if he thought he was protecting you? By disappearing, by not even calling?" Amanda placed the cup down carefully. "You have a son now," she said. "What would you want him to know if it were you?" The words hit like a bullet. Mike looked over to the corner of the room where his 8-year-old, Danny, had left his baseball glove. And for a moment, he was 8 again himself, sitting on the porch, waiting for a father who never returned. Back in LA, Jack's newfound fame came with strings. Journalists hunted him for sound bites. The VA reopened his case, but demanded paperwork that had long since been lost in transit or floods or bureaucracy. Therefore, Stallone's legal team stepped in, and so did veterans' organizations. But a familiar face emerged from the shadows. Senator Warren Wallace, up for re-election, held a press conference. "We honor Jack Reynolds and all veterans by ensuring they receive the care they deserve. I will personally look into his case." It sounded noble. It was anything but. Because Wallace had denied funding to shelter vets just 2 months earlier. Now he was using Jack's name as leverage, and Laura, watching it live, felt her stomach turn. Jack, unaware of most of this political maneuvering, spent his mornings helping clean the shelter kitchen. It gave his hands something to do, gave his heart something to cling to. But the dreams wouldn't stop, and neither did the questions. One afternoon he sat with Laura and asked, "Why me?" She tilted her head. "There are hundreds of guys like me out there," Jack said. "Better men. Men who didn't screw up, who didn't abandon their family. Why am I the face of this?" Laura looked him straight in the eye. "Because sometimes the world needs one story to wake it up." That night, Stallone posted a second video, this time from his home. In it, he said, "We're not just raising money, we're raising awareness. For every Jack Reynolds, there are hundreds more suffering in silence, forgotten, invisible. That ends now." The video trended for days. And in a quiet moment, sitting in his cruiser, Mike Reynolds opened his phone, took a deep breath, and typed a message. "My name is Mike Reynolds. I think you're my father." He never hit send, not yet. But the bridge was forming. Therefore, the story was shifting from survival to reconciliation. And Jack didn't even know the next chapter was about to hit harder than any war. Because someone had just leaked his full military file to the press. And buried inside was something no one expected. Jack had turned down a full medical discharge in 2005 to protect a fellow soldier from court-martial, a decision that cost him his pension, a sacrifice no one knew, until now. And it changed everything. Some truths feel heavier than war. Jack sat on a park bench 2 blocks from the shelter, clutching the folder Laura had handed him that morning. His military record, declassified, unsealed, now public. He had told no one what was inside. Not about the hearing, not about the incident in Mosul, not about the man he'd protected, and what it had cost him. But the world was watching now, and secrets don't survive the spotlight. Meanwhile, Senator Wallace scheduled a press event titled, "Restoring Dignity to Our Heroes." Large banners featuring Jack's face flanked the stage. American flags lined the steps. News crews were already setting up as aides rehearsed his speech. But Jack hadn't agreed to attend. Therefore, Wallace's team offered incentives, a VA benefits package expedited, an honorary medal, even a promise to reopen funding to the shelter. Stallone wasn't buying it. "You're turning a man's pain into a podium," he said, when he confronted Wallace privately. The senator smiled. "That's politics." "No," Stallone replied. "That's cowardice." Back at the shelter, Jack stared at the TV. Every channel, every feed, his face, his name, his war. The pressure built like a storm in his chest. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. Laura sat beside him, quiet. "It's okay to be seen," she said gently. Jack looked at her. "Not when they're using you." Miles away, Mike Reynolds sat alone in his patrol car. He had watched every interview, every post, every tear that threatened to break free from Jack's eyes on screen, and still he hadn't sent the message. The anger, still there. The abandonment, still raw. But there was something else now. Therefore he drove. without sirens, without words, just the low hum of the engine and the beating in his chest. He pulled into the shelter parking lot just after sunset. Inside, Jack was helping serve dinner. Laura spotted the uniform first, then the badge, then the name on it. "Jack," she whispered. Jack turned and froze. It had been 30 years, but a father knows. "Mike?" Mike's eyes locked onto his. For a moment the world narrowed. No applause, no speeches, just two men, bound by blood and broken years. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Until Jack took one slow step forward. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. Mike's jaw clenched. "Then why didn't you come back?" Jack's voice cracked. "Because I didn't know how to come back as half a man." A silence heavier than steel settled between them. Then Mike did something no one expected. He reached out and hugged his father. It wasn't clean, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. The next morning, Stallone asked Jack for a private meeting. They sat behind the shelter, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. "There's something I need to show you," Stallone said. He opened a small photo album. Inside were pictures of his younger brother, Jacob, laughing, training, posing in uniform. Jack's breath caught. "He saved me once," Jack whispered. "Threw himself in front of a blast. Took the hit. I survived because of him." Stallone swallowed hard. "That's why I had to help you." Their eyes met. Two men, two soldiers, two brothers of the same war. And in that moment, the past folded into peace. But the world wasn't done testing Jack, because just as the press prepared for the senator's event, an anonymous source leaked a video. Footage from 2005, a grainy courtroom inside a military base. Jack Reynolds standing tall, refusing to testify against a young soldier caught in a fatal friendly fire incident. His words echoed through the screen. He froze. He was a kid. We've all been there. "I won't bury him for a mistake I've made myself." The room had gasped. The judge had ruled against Jack's discharge, and he'd lost everything. But that moment, unknown for years, now lit up the internet. Therefore, the public outcry grew louder. Reinstate Jack's pension. Give him back what he lost. This man is more honorable than the whole system. Stallone held another live stream. He said, "Jack Reynolds sacrificed twice, once on the battlefield, and once for someone else's son. That's the kind of man we build statues for." Donations tripled. A nonprofit offered Jack a home. A school wanted him to speak. And Laura, tears in her eyes, handed him a letter from the VA. His benefits? Reinstated. With back pay. It wasn't charity. It was overdue justice. Jack stood on the steps of the shelter 2 days before the senator's event. Mike stood beside him. So did Laura. And Stallone. The sky was blue. The city quiet. "I'm not going to the press conference," Jack said. Stallone nodded. "You don't owe them anything." "But I am going to speak." Mike raised a brow. "Where?" Jack smiled. "At the memorial, for the guys who didn't make it." And so he did. The following day, Jack stood at the Veterans Memorial in Westwood, California. No cameras, no press, just a small crowd, and a folded American flag in his hands. "My name is Jack Reynolds," he said. "And for a long time, I thought I was broken. But maybe I was just waiting for someone to see me." He placed the flag on the granite and whispered, "This is for Jacob." Then he turned to Mike. "And this is for you." Father and son embraced again. No politics, no cameras, just presence. And as they walked away, Jack caught Laura's eye and smiled. "Sometimes the battle isn't overseas," he said. "Sometimes it's right here." Laura nodded, tears shining. And Jack, for the first time in decades, felt like a soldier again. Not because of what he had done, but because of who he had become. Jack Reynolds never asked for recognition. All he ever wanted was to be a man his son could be proud of. and maybe one day sleep through the night without waking up drenched in sweat and ghosts. He didn't expect a monument. He didn't expect the world to remember his name. He certainly didn't expect Hollywood to come knocking. But sometimes, life gives back what it once stole. And sometimes, it gives even more. 3 weeks had passed since the memorial. Stallone had quietly arranged for Jack to move into a modest house outside Pasadena. Not a mansion, nothing flashy, just a quiet one-story with a porch swing and a red mailbox. The walls were bare at first, but soon, photos went up. One of Jack in uniform, younger and unshaven. One of Danny, his grandson, holding a baseball in one hand and a chocolate-stained popsicle in the other. And one of Mike, his son, arm around Jack's shoulders, both smiling with a kind of cautious peace. The scandal surrounding Senator Wallace had grown. An investigative reporter from the Washington Post uncovered documents showing the senator had repeatedly blocked housing aid to homeless veterans while funneling money into private real estate. Stallone didn't say a word publicly. He didn't need to. The truth was doing just fine on its own. Wallace's re-election campaign collapsed. And in the next congressional session, a bill titled the Reynolds Act was introduced, ensuring faster benefits reinstatement for wrongfully discharged veterans. It passed with bipartisan support. Jack never asked for that either. But Laura called him the night it was announced, crying. "You changed things," she whispered. Jack held the phone against his ear and stared out over the porch. "I didn't do it alone." On a cool Friday evening, Stallone stopped by with a 6-pack of root beer and an envelope. He sat on the porch swing beside Jack, who was feeding a stray tabby that had taken up residence under the steps. "You know," Stallone said, cracking a bottle open, "you could have been in movies." Jack laughed. "Only if the movie's about peeling potatoes in a mess tent." Stallone reached into his coat and handed Jack the envelope. Inside was a photo, black and white, grainy. It showed Jacob Stallone and Jack, side by side, laughing, arms slung over each other's shoulders in the desert sun. Jack's hand trembled. "I thought this was gone." "I found it in my mom's attic," Stallone said. "She used to write to Jake every week. He sent her that photo before, you know." Jack's voice was gravel. He was a good kid. They sat in silence. Then Stallone said, "You did more than survive, Jack. You taught us how to fight a different kind of war." Jack nodded, eyes glistening. "That's the one I almost lost." That Sunday, Jack was invited to speak at a small community center. Nothing official. No red carpet. Just a few folding chairs and some worn-out flags on the wall. He stood in front of 24 young veterans and said, "You think coming home is the end of the war. But sometimes it's the beginning. The battlefield is quiet. But the mind remembers everything. Some wounds don't bleed. They sit in your chest. They mess with your sleep. They make you forget who you are. But if you're breathing, if you're here, it means there's still a mission. And sometimes, that mission is just to stay alive long enough for someone to see you." The room was silent. A few tears, a few nods, and one slow clap. It spread. And for the first time, Jack didn't shrink from the sound of applause. He let it wash over him, not because he needed it, but because it no longer hurt. Later that night, he sat alone on his porch with a worn letter in his hands. It was one he had never mailed, written in 1999, addressed to Mike. In it, he'd tried to explain, tried to say sorry, tried to be something more than a ghost. Jack read it one last time, then stood and walked to the fire pit. He held the paper to the flame, watched it curl and vanish into the night air. Behind him, the door creaked open. Mike stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. Danny trailed behind, baseball glove in hand. Jack smiled and took the cup. "You ever teach him how to throw a curveball?" he asked Mike. "Not yet," Mike said, grinning. Jack stood. "Well, I've got time." They walked into the yard. The stars blinked quietly above them, and for once, Jack didn't feel like a man left behind. He felt like a man finally home. He didn't look like a hero, but that's the thing about real heroes. They rarely do. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.